The G League Ignite gets prospects into the NBA every draft, so let's dive into their sleepers. This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break them down. Former 5-star recruit Tyler Smith is my pick for this year's G League Ignite sleeper. Smith, a Texas native, played the last 2 seasons in the Overtime Elite program. Last year, he averaged 16 points and 8 rebounds. Now he's in the G League, and I think that this is a great situation for him going forward. Smith is going to be next to other ball handlers who can make scoring easy for him, and he gives the Ignite some real size in the front court, since Ron Holland and Matas Buzelis are still more perimeter oriented. On offense, Smith's role down the line reminds me a bit of Taylor Hendricks, who was the 9th pick in this year's draft. Smith's appeal starts with his shooting, particularly from 3. The Ignite forward is a very willing shooter from deep, and I think that he has some real touch. In his first 5 games with the Ignite, Smith has made 4 of his 11 threes. That's about 36%, but it's a tiny sample size, so I'm not that worried about his conversion right now. The hope is that it stays around that 36% mark, but at this stage, it's more so for me about Smith's willingness and the looks that he's getting. Those largely come out of pick and pop and spot ups, which make sense for him now and in the future. Then, the OTE product has also shown flashes facing up around the high elbow and being able to shoot over the top, out of the triple threat or a single dribble. Beyond his shooting, Smith can also be deployed in a more simple catch and finish type role. He's around 6'10", maybe even slightly taller than that, with real bounce. This means that he can play above the rim with ease, especially if he's playing the 5 with a spaced out court, but I think that Smith is more of a 4. However, we've already seen in preseason that Smith is a lob threat and he's real active around the dunker spot and the baseline to good effect. Looking ahead, I want to see him improve his finishing from close range when he's not just dunking. The Texan has to get better at converting on touch shots around the basket, which should be easy looks for him, and especially he needs to keep working on his right hand. Defensively, the cell is again somewhat similar to Hendricks. You hope that Smith can space the floor offensively while then creating plays on defense closer to the basket. We've seen some flashes of this. Smith can get up above the rim on this end, his length and height come into play naturally, and like I said about his pop, he also has a pretty good second jump. On top of that, Smith is fluid, he moves well around the floor, he can hedge and recover back to the paint, for instance. But since he will have to defend close to the basket quite a bit, Smith has to get stronger. He has somewhat of a narrow frame and he can offset that with his pop usually, but he can get pushed around. However, I see the Ignite prospect as more of a 4 than a 5 like I said, so he should largely be coming in to help on plays rather than being the primary rim protector or having to bump with heavier bigs. Then it will also be a matter of getting more reps at a high level. The Ignite will play tons of games, so this is great news for Smith, who until now has not gotten that much exposure against really high caliber competition. He's raw making reads on defense, he can gamble too much and be late recovering as a result, or in the pick and roll, which will be important for him especially, his positioning can still be off. But all of this is theoretically fixable, and come next summer, I really believe that Tyler Smith can be a first-round pick. London Johnson joined the Ignite out of high school, and he's in his 2nd year now with the program. Last season, behind Scoot Henderson, Johnson averaged a bit over 10 points and 3 assists in 30 games. At this stage as a scorer, I like Johnson the most from the mid-range. Here, he can use his ball handling to chain moves together into his pull-up, and he's good at keeping defenders on their toes with his quick gather and release. The Jamaican point guard is also capable out of ball screens. He's not that explosive, but he does understand how to use a pick to get those inches he needs between him and his defender. Johnson has solid size for a point guard at about 6'3", 6'4". Like I just said, he's not that twitchy, but I do think he gets the most out of his athleticism. The Ignite playmaker isn't jacked either, but he knows how to use his body to bump defenders, create space with his shoulder, and then rise into his shot. Johnson plays a physical brand of basketball, and that will serve him well going forward. But although the former 4-star recruit is pretty advanced from in between for his age, he still has to improve from 3. In his first Ignite season, he shot 33% from deep on about 2 attempts a game, which must increase as a point guard in today's NBA. This year, that should be a point of emphasis for Johnson. So far, he's 5 for 12 from 3 in preseason, which looks encouraging, but it's far too early to draw any real conclusions. Even then though, the shots he makes are spotting up, and not creating his shot off the bounce. This is fine next to other wing-sized playmakers like Holland or Buzelis, and you'll find plenty of similar types in the NBA, but it limits Johnson's individual ceiling. As a finisher, it's a similar story. Johnson is physical when he gets downhill, and I think he's pretty crafty with his ball handling. He uses his body well once again to create separation, and I think he's unpredictable with his changes of speed. I also like the Ignite prospect's patience probing defenses, but at the end of the day, he is limited athletically. He's not small per se, but he lacks pop and burst, so he's not someone who can play consistently over length. Even if Johnson beats his defender, it can still be a struggle for him to finish cleanly if they're able to then recover. And although Johnson is physical, he's still only about 6'3", 6'4" at most, so as he faces bigger, stronger defenders, he cannot be that impactful or even get deep position into the paint. Diving into his passing, we're mostly looking at a drive and kick facilitator. Johnson can get into the paint and collapse defenses, and for this to happen, he doesn't need to be all the way at the rim, and then he plays with his head up to find his shooters. Maybe he's not overly creative, but he makes safe reads, and generally he's reliable with his deliveries. Quickly touching on Johnson's defense, he genuinely competes to keep his man in front, and I also think that he's pretty good at navigating screens. In turn, this also benefits the Ignite's bigs, who I think will mostly play in drop coverage throughout the season. Johnson is alert, he can also handle physicality down this end, and I like him at the point of attack against small ball handlers. However, he's strictly a positional defender, and I have questions about how his defense will hold up once he faces better, quicker, more dynamic athletes. Babacar Sane from Senegal is also in his second season for the Ignite. Sane originally comes from the NBA Academy in Africa, and he also has experience in the Basketball Africa League. He joined the Ignite mostly playing the 2 or the 3, but now he's used only at the wing or as a forward, playing the foursome, and he's even gotten a couple of cracks here and there at the small ball 5. Sane stands out the most because of his athleticism, and largely this will show up in the open court. The Ignite prospect is a great run and jump athlete who can really push the pace and get from one end of the floor to the other in a moment's notice. Sane can't really handle in compact spaces, but he can do so when he has the entire floor ahead of him, and there he puts his long strides to good use. Despite all of this though, I have to emphasize, Sane is really raw still. He's developed since last season, but overall, he's really early in his basketball path. So even though he can quickly speed up a game, he needs to improve at playing more under control, and also at switching gears and understanding when to speed up or slow down. Sane is always active on the floor, and you can see his potential, but it's also true that he can have some really frustrating moments. The idea with him is that eventually he can play multiple roles on both ends, but in order to do so, he's gonna need a ton of patience. So whichever situation Sane lands in after the Ignite is gonna be more important for him than both Smith and Johnson. In the half court, Sane's role is very limited for now. Most of the time, he's going to be spotting up on the wings. For what it's worth, I don't think he's a bad shooter, and I like his high release point, but again, he really has to slow down. Sane can be guilty of rushing his shot, and he can also improve his shot selection. At times, it's almost like he can predetermine what he's going to do, rather than just letting the game come to him. If Sane can improve his three-point shooting, this will really help his outlook as a prospect, since I think he can be pretty dangerous attacking closeouts. The NBA Academy Africa alum has a quick first step, a filled-out frame, and a real ability to play above the rim. Again, like with everything we've touched on so far, Sane's process needs ironing out in the long run, but he is still moldable, and he always piques my interest at least once or twice a game. Strangely enough, and the sample size is small, I actually think Sane might be more comfortable creating his own jump shot rather than catching and shooting. He's flashed tiny glimpses here, but with someone as green as him, I think it's important to take the whole package into consideration. On defense, as I alluded to, the idea is that Sane can be a switchy, versatile wing, who starts on 3s and 4s, but can check every position except for big 5s in spurts. But really, at this point, that's even more theoretical than his role on offense. The truth is, Sane's processing of the game on this end of the floor is still really far from where it should be. He's okay as an on-ball defender, but once he has to focus on more than one thing at once, things get dicey for him. Sane will miss rotations, he'll be late on switches, he can reach in and foul when there is absolutely no need to gamble, and off the ball, he loses concentration too easily and too often right now. So even his athletic tools cannot save him in those circumstances. For now, I consider Sane as a late second round pick, but I buy him being someone that a team is going to want in their developmental system, given his awesome size and athleticism, and flashes of leveraging those tools into scoring on few touches, while still maintaining some two-way potential.